one. I do see a little, like next to my screen sharing thing, it says live.
Okay.
But yeah, let's ask.
Like next to my screen sharing thing, it says live. Okay.
I can also hear myself on your end, or like I'm getting some delayed feedback.
Okay, so I will mute myself. I think it looks like we are live. Somebody says we see you. Okay, so hello, everybody. Welcome to this next session of AAC in the Cloud 2020. Thank you so much for bearing with us through the technical difficulties. It looks like everything is good to go now. So I'm really excited to introduce you to the next presenter. We have Emily Diaz with us. She's going to be presenting about getting staff buy-in for all-day AAC use in the classroom. I'm really excited to hear this presentation. I'll also be monitoring the Slack channel. If you have any questions or if there's any technical difficulties, just write in there and we will get it taken care of. And I am going to pass it over to Emily.
Awesome. I am so excited to share with you guys everything that I know about staff buy-in for AAC use in the classroom. A little bit about myself. I just finished up year 5 as a speech language pathologist in a school-based setting. I have been in the same setting with essentially the same caseload for about 5 years now. So I feel like I've been able to get a pretty good rhythm and try different things out and see, how it works with my staff and for my caseload. And I'm really excited to share that with you. If you see me look here, it's because I have some notes. I tend to be a little bit tangential. So just to keep us on track and in time, I've got my bullet points to make sure that I give you guys the most bang for your buck that you didn't pay because this is free in the 50 minutes that we get to spend together here. One other thing, if you attended my longer workshop back in October, I do want you to know that you are going to get a ton of valuable information from this shorter workshop also. The longer workshop was more of like a bird's eye overview of managing AAC in the classroom. And today we're going to do like more laser focused on the actual buy-in piece with staff and that staff coaching component. So let's dig into this topic. Before we get started, the not so fun stuff, just some disclosures. My financial relationships with this presentation, I'm the owner of Emily Diaz SLP, which is a website and Etsy shop with trainings and apparel for SLPs and teachers. My non-financial relationships, I'm an ASHA and a SIG 12 member, as many of us are here for AAC in the cloud. And if you want to connect with me after this presentation ends, I've made it very easy because I use essentially the same name across all of my social channels and platforms. So on Instagram, you can find me at Emily Diaz SLP. Facebook, same thing, / Emily Diaz SLP. And my website, emilydiazslp.com. So super easy to remember. As long as you can remember my name and that I'm an SLP, you should be able to find me anywhere. All right, so learning objectives while we hang out for the next 45 to 50 minutes. This is the fun stuff. The swing that I'm taking on this presentation is definitely a different approach than how I've trained other SLPs or staff before. I'm not going to focus so much on like the AAC interventions that we're reading in research. I do have one really incredible research study that I embed into all of my training. So you will hear about that one today, and that is by Jill Center and Matt Bod. Obviously, a lot of this comes from my professional experience. Like I said, I've been in the same setting with a similar caseload for about 5 years now. But there are 2 books that I am going to share with you throughout the presentation today, and they are not SLP books, they're not textbooks. I guess they would fall under the category of like professional or personal development. And the reason why I want to share those with you during this presentation is because they have been complete game changers for AAC implementation and staff coaching. And to be honest, when I read them through the first couple of times, AAC is not what was on my mind. But as I kept coming back to certain things that I read in these books, I realized how closely it was connected with coaching my staff in classrooms. And so obviously I had to read through them again with just thinking about AAC, and like I said, complete game changers. The first one is called, I don't know if you guys can see this because I'm probably just a little tiny picture in your top corner of your screen. The first one's called The Coaching Habit. This is by Michael Bungay Stanier. And the second book is called Atomic Habits by James Clear. If you missed those and you can't see me here, I can always post those in the Slack channel after the presentation. But as we work through, keep those two books in mind, The Coaching Habit and Atomic Habits. At the end of this presentation, you should understand the concept of habits and its importance in training our classroom staff. You should become able to apply various methods to measure staff buy-in. So remember, we're going to talk a lot about coaching and habits, and then how that ties into staff buy-in. We also need ways to measure that staff buy-in because it's incredibly important for us to be able to recognize if what we're doing is working or not. Because when it's not working, we need to change what we're doing. And if we can't measure that, we don't know if we as SLPs need to change. And lastly, you'll be able to identify 4 key coaching models for dynamic training. And this is the part that comes from Center and Bod's research that I love. All right, some of my favorite pieces of literature, like I said, are the ones that don't focus on direct AAC interventions, but rather focus on communication partner interventions. And if you're not already aware, communication partner interventions and some of those indirect components of AAC therapy are massive when it comes to managing AAC in the classroom and having staff buy-in and getting the staff to continue implementing AAC even when you're not there. And I think that's the goal of every SLP that pushes into a classroom, is that speech therapy or AAC implementation doesn't just happen when I show up in the classroom, that I could walk in any of my classrooms at any time of day and they could be doing exactly what I showed and trained them to do. So this quote comes from the first book I mentioned, The Coaching Habit. And he says that the essence of coaching lies in helping others and unlocking their potential. So this quote is important to me. Like I said, these are not specifically AAC or SLP books, but this quote was important to me as an AAC SLP because we are not the only ones that can implement AAC, and we really shouldn't be. And so if you're somebody who tends to take an expert position on AAC, we need to work on changing that and work more on unlocking potential of the classroom staff, because that's where it's really going to happen. And this is also important because direct services are not the only evidence-based practice for AAC implementation. You really need a good balance of the direct and indirect. And in my experience, I've often found that some of the direct doesn't come until I've done a lot of indirect work with the staff. The AAC magic in the classroom, so to speak, happens truly when you unlock the potential of the classroom staff. And that's why I want to talk about coaching and habits today. Okay, so in the longer workshop that I mentioned, I go into more detail about what a preliminary training might look like sorry, you can't see the whole slide. There you go. But like a preliminary training might look like with my staff. That's not something I'm going to go into detail on today, but it is an important piece of coaching. I always do that ahead of time. But what we're really going to focus on is coaching in the classroom. And really, the secret to all of this buy-in and my staff implementing AAC, even when I'm not there, is that what goes on in the classroom looks a lot more like coaching from me. I'm talking about when I'm in the classroom. What goes on in the classroom when I'm there looks a whole lot more like coaching and a lot less like lesson planning. If you know anything about me, I do not lesson plan. I do not prep a lot of therapy. I'm one of those no prep SLPs. I just kind of show up and I know the methodologies of coaching that I need to use in order for the classroom staff and the students to be successful. So the book, I'm still talking about the coaching habit here. In this book, he talks about that coaching should be simple, it should be frequent, and it should be a relatively informal act. And so if you think about that preliminary training where maybe you gather all of the self-contained teachers together for an hour of their time to talk about AAC 101 or the basics of AAC. It might be simple. It might be really overwhelming for them. It's not frequent if you're doing it just one time. And it's not truly an informal act if you've like gathered everyone together and put an invitation on their Google Calendar to get together for this, in-service training that they get credit for. So that's not truly coaching. So what we're going to look at is a little bit different than that. And that's the reason why I'm not sharing about the ins and outs of that preliminary training. The book goes on to talk about how coaching actually lets you work less hard while having more impact. And that part of the book really stood out to me because I think you can relate to this as SLPs. We work very hard, and sometimes it can be kind of a thankless job. Like we don't always see a ton of return on our investment right away, especially when it comes to AAC and slow progress sometimes. So when I read that part of the book that said I can work less hard and have more impact if I start coaching, yeah, sign me up for that. And the reason he says this is because, oh, I'm sorry, I skipped a part. This is why I have notes, you guys. He goes on to say that you're probably not getting very effective coaching, which is true. We know that a lot of SLPs come out of undergrad or grad school not having learned a ton about AAC in general, let alone how to train other people on AAC. So he says, you're probably not getting very effective coaching, and therefore you're probably not delivering very effective coaching. So again, read this book. It's going to make you a better coach. And I'm going to show you how this book is tied into the research on this slide here. So the strategies that you see on this screen were done, come from a study done by Jill Center and Matt Bod, and it's called The Use of an 8-Step Instructional Model to Train School Staff in Partner Augmented Input. If you haven't read it, highly recommend. It is probably the basis and foundation of the staff buy-in that I get. The biggest piece of advice before we dive into the sequence here on this screen is that you find a time that you can be in the classroom where there's naturally high communication opportunities. I'm very strategic about when I go into a classroom, what time of day. It's not very arbitrary. I don't have a ton of flexibility in my schedule. I move between like 5 campuses and multiple classrooms on those campuses, but I do try to be very intentional about the time frame that I'm in the classroom. For a lot of the classrooms that I support, this looks like a morning meeting or like a calendar time in the morning, depending on if you're secondary or elementary. A lot of the time it might be during lunch or during snack. There's a lot of communication happening then. And this is important because it makes your job and the classroom staff's job 100 times easier if we're already communicating. If you've ever tried to do therapy during an activity or a lesson in the classroom where there's like no need for communication, like a worksheet or something, it's very challenging and painstaking. So make sure that you're finding time in the classroom with high communication opportunities. Makes your job easier because you don't really have to plan anything extra, and it makes the classroom staff's job easier because they can easily replicate what you're demonstrating. It's something that happens on a daily basis, and it's a time that they know there's going to be communication opportunities. So let's walk through these 4 steps of coaching in the classroom and kind of why they're important. So the first step when it comes to coaching in the classroom is that you would go in and lead a lesson. And so in Center and Bod's research, they call this contextualized strategy demonstration. It's contextualized because it's happening like real time in the moment in the classroom. When we talk about that preliminary training that happens when you gather all the teachers together for an hour before the beginning of the school year so that they can do AAC all year long, that's very decontextualized. It's very by the book, it's textbook. They may not be able to implement that. So what I do after that preliminary training is make sure that I am leading lessons so that I can provide that same strategy demonstration that I gave in the preliminary training, but in a more contextualized environment. After that phase, I move into co-leading a lesson. And in the research, they call this controlled practice with feedback. So it gives an opportunity to the teacher or para or whoever is co-leading the lesson with you to do so in a controlled way. Like you're still kind of managing the lesson, you're managing the activity that you're doing, but giving them some more room so that they can practice those skills that they've observed you doing while you're leading the lesson. And you can provide feedback as you go. When it comes to feedback, and I don't have enough time to dig into this. That's why I am telling you time and time again to read these books. This book tells you how to give the best feedback to the people that you work with in a way that gives them less advice and asks them more questions and truly helps them learn and discover AAC for themselves. After the period of co-leading a lesson, we move into where I kind of role play para. So I'm still showing up in the classroom during the same activity, during the same time of the day. But this time I am taking a step back and really playing the part of a paraprofessional where somebody else is in charge of the lesson and maybe I'm just providing aided language stimulation. I'm still kind of in that environment, controlling what's going on, and I'm able to provide feedback, but I'm going to fade that feedback a little bit. And then lastly, classroom observation in their research is called advanced practice with faded feedback. And so truly when I'm doing a classroom observation, I'm in the classroom and I'm standing or sitting in the back or at the teacher's desk. Like I am not in the physical activity. I might give them feedback later, but I'm kind of watching how all the moving pieces are coming together for the magic to happen. I've unlocked the potential of the classroom staff by this point when I'm doing classroom observations. After classroom observations, it doesn't talk about this here, but like what happens after that? Do you just go into classrooms and sit there and watch them the whole time? No. But at this point, I know that AAC is going to be happening all day. Maybe not, well, every day, maybe not all day yet. But at least during this structured lesson or environment that I have taught them, that I've modeled for them. And it might give me more space to do more direct interventions with some of my students who I need to focus on, more specific things, while I know that the environment is still providing aided language stimulation regularly throughout the day. A big piece of advice when it comes to these 4 steps of coaching in the classroom is to not rush the process. It seems very quick. It's 4 things. You'd think, okay, I led a lesson. Okay, I'm going to co-lead a lesson. I'm going to role play. Now I'm going to observe. But the research really supports improvements following this system after 4 to 5 months. And if you really think about being in a school setting, you can't really go 4 to 5 months without there being some type of holiday break. So I'm just going to round it up to 4 to 6 weeks per phase. So for 4 to 6 weeks, I'm going to lead a lesson. For 4 to 6 weeks, I'm going to co-lead a lesson, so on and so forth. So we've got 6 months of coaching in the classroom to where I truly feel like my staff have a grasp on what should be going on in the classroom. Now, this doesn't touch on buy-in yet, but this is what should be going on in the classroom. We're going to talk about buy-in next. So how do we make this coaching in the classroom better? Because you can read the research and you could start implementing it, but if you don't have rapport with the teacher or the paraprofessionals in that classroom, I don't know how successful it will be. I think buy-in is a huge component when you're coaching in the classroom. So building rapport, I wrote down a catchy phrase that I swear last night at like midnight when I was reviewing my slides, I was like, this is it. This is the phrase. It's probably the most silly phrase that you'll ever hear. But I'm reading through it. I'm like, oh, that rhymes. They could probably remember that. So it's build rapport. So AAC is not a chore. If you don't build rapport, they're not going to want to do AAC. It's going to feel hard. It's going to feel like it's not their job. This is for the speech therapist. When she comes in here, she's so bossy. She tells us what to do. You have got to build the rapport so that when you talk about AAC implementation, it sounds fun, it sounds exciting, and not like a chore. I have a lot of fun with my classroom staff when it comes to AAC implementation, modeling the lessons, all of the role playing that we do. It's a fun and exciting environment. And if you skip that piece, it's going to be awful for the classroom staff and for yourself. You're going to feel so burnt out and so run down. You're not going to like your job. So building rapport, super important. The next tip for better coaching is that you would implement the strategies while you're in the classroom. Obviously, when you're working through those coaching in the classroom steps, you're going to be implementing strategies. But there's times that I come into the classroom that are unscheduled and I just jump in and I start modeling. So implementing those strategies so they can truly see it in action, like I said, in that contextualized environment. You can tell people all you want, what you want them to do, but until you truly show them and provide them constructive feedback and coach them, it's not going to happen. And then lastly, the third tip for better coaching in the classroom is to use their favorite things. And I'm going to get more into this in the next slide. Like I said, we have a lot of fun. It's very exciting when we do AAC in the classroom. I use a token economy system for my students, and I use a token economy system for the staff that I work with. They can earn and be reinforced by the modeling that they do. And we have challenges and all things fun like that. So they might be able to earn like a free jeans pass, so like gold in the school setting. They might earn a Starbucks coffee. And these things that they know that they're going to work toward earning hold them accountable because we've set the goal and we're tracking data, just like IEP goals, but for classroom staff. So what does this look like exactly? I honestly cannot tell you the first time that I saw clicker counters and thought, I should use these for AAC. I don't know if it was in another presentation, if it was in a research study, or I just saw one laying around and thought, what a genius idea. I don't think I can take credit for this. I'm sure it came from somewhere else. But my pro tip for you is to use clicker counters to track daily data. And this is the part that I'm talking about here when I say use their favorite things and keep them accountable by setting a goal and tracking data. Clicker counters are how you're going to track the data. The goal that you set may vary. We know as AAC SLPs that the research shows 200 model opportunities per day lends itself to communication growth for AAC users. So if you want to start setting a goal of 200 models a day, great. A lot of my teachers can't start there, so we start a little bit smaller. We wear these on like our lanyards because in the schools you're usually wearing your ID, your keys, probably some visuals, and these clip on there like really easily. And it's a fun way for us to track the data. Now I want to share with you some data from one of the middle school self-contained classrooms that I work in and show you kind of what does this look like? Does it actually work? It's essentially what I'm trying to say. So let me explain this graph to you here. So this is from 4 weeks into coaching in the classroom. And if you remember back to those 4 steps of coaching in the classroom, we want to hang out in each step for about 4 to 6 weeks. So this was within the first like 1 or 2 steps of leading or co-leading, and then also doing some modeling for them around the classroom. The graph on the bottom shows you the different classroom staff, the teacher and 3 paras. It's a very large classroom. And then this is the % increase of modeled words. So this is the clicker counter data in action. I will mention, people have asked me this before when I've shared this, why is the teacher's bar so short? Shouldn't hers be the biggest? But really, it doesn't matter that hers is short. I mean, it does matter. The reason why it's short is because she already had training in AAC and modeling. She's come to trainings with me before. And so the number of words that she was modeling a day was already greater than what her paraprofessionals were modeling. The paraprofessionals were starting at a very low number of models per day. And then because of the token economy system, because of the coaching, because of tracking data, we're able to see just how much they can grow in a 4-week time period. So let me give you some of the numbers here. I think the most shocking one is para number 2 here. Everyone always says, woohoo, para number 2. So para number 2 started the coaching in the classroom modeling 14 words a day on average. So this is after we've done that preliminary training. That's not coaching, that's just a 1-hour training. 14 words a day. Can we really learn language if we're modeling 14 words a day, people? So after a 4-week period, after coaching, she was able to increase by 378% and now was modeling 67 words per day on average, which still isn't what research says we need to be near, but what an improvement for that one para. And so same thing for all these other paras here. Para number 3 started at 8 words a day. That's like one sentence. I say one sentence and I've already said 8 words for the day. Increased by 175% to 22 words per day on average. And when we do this, we keep track of it. We have a tracker that we put up on the board at the end of the day. You know, they click, click, click all day long. Oh, I should probably mention, this will probably be a question that somebody's asking in Slack because I always forget to say truly how you use the clickers. You click the clicker counter for every like word or pathway that you're using to get to a word. So every time you touch the screen or every time you touch the core board, you're clicking. And so I guess it's not truly one click per word because sometimes you need to go, you know, like groups, food, apple. So that would be 3 clicks. So you clicked it 3 times, you showed them a pathway that was 3 hits. And so at the end of the day, the number that is on their clicker counter is what gets transferred to the tracker that we use. And I'll talk more about that tracker at the end. And I have a little freebie for you if you stick around. But we do a little challenge for 30 days. So that's where this 4-week data came from. But it's so important to me to be able to measure and see what I'm doing is working and be able to share with you guys how to replicate or duplicate that for your caseloads. And I know that it's replicable because I work in many different classrooms. So it doesn't just work for this one classroom. It works in the 5 or 6 other classrooms that I've coached also. All right. If you want your classroom staff to change their habits when it comes to AAC implementation, if they're starting at 8 words modeled per day, if they're starting at 0 words modeled per day, you probably want to change that. But before you change what they're doing, you have to change what you're doing. And so if you feel like you've been doing this for a few years and you're like, nothing I'm doing is working, I don't know how to get these people to model when I'm not here, I don't know how to get buy-in from them, you probably have to change what you're doing. You probably have to change your methodology, try different coaching, read a book. And that's what I did. I flailed with AAC for a solid 2 years before I just got so frustrated that I dove into learning as much as I could to change what I was doing. This quote comes from the second book, the Atomic Habits book by James Clear. He says, you should be far more concerned with your current trajectory than your current results. So don't beat yourself up or get frustrated if it's been 2 years, nobody's modeling AAC in the classroom. You walk in and you can't even see the devices out in the classroom. Don't worry about those current results. Worry about your current trajectory. Now, what this means in the book, he gives an example of a pilot, an airplane pilot, taking off from Los Angeles airport, trying to fly into New York. So he says, if that airplane pilot changes the trajectory or the direction of that flight by even 3 degrees, he's going to wind up in Washington, D.C. instead of in New York. He also gives another example of an ice cube sitting in a room that's like 26 degrees. And we know point of freezing is 32 degrees. So the ice cube should start melting after 32 degrees. So the ice cube sitting in there, 26 degrees, and you're adjusting the thermostat, 27 degrees, nothing, 28 degrees, nothing, 29 degrees, nothing, 30, 31, 32, all of this work and energy that you're putting in, you're not getting any results. So you can't get this ice cube to melt at all. All of a sudden 33 degrees and the ice cube starts melting. And it wasn't that 1 degree at the end that changed the ice cube to melting. It was the accumulation of all of those degrees changing over time. So make sure that your current trajectory is in a good place and you don't have to worry about your current results. And that might mean that you need to change the way that you're doing things, and we need to grow as SLPs. Let's talk about changing behavior, since we're on the topic of maybe needing to do things a little bit differently. This will help you change the way that you approach AAC implementation, your coaching, those types of things. And it will also help your classroom staff. So the 4 laws of behavior change come from that second book that I referenced, Atomic Habits. And he says that there are 4 things that you need to do in order to be able to change your behavior and either build a habit or eliminate an unwanted habit. For the sake of AAC, we're talking about improving a habit. We want our classroom staff to be modeling more. We want them to be implementing AAC when we're not there, and we want them to enjoy doing it. We want the buy-in. So he says, first of all, you have to make it obvious. You got to make it attractive. You have to make it easy, and you have to make it satisfying. And I told you guys at the beginning of this presentation that the first time I read through this book, I did not read it as an SLP and AAC. I read it because I wanted to learn how to wake up early and be motivated to work out in the morning. And then after I finished it, I was like, if I could do that for myself, I could change the behavior of my classroom staff if we do these things, make it obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying. So let's break down those 4 things and take some notes, because I'm going to share some actual ways that I did this in my classrooms. So make it obvious. In the book, he gives many examples of how to make things obvious. So one of the examples is that you need to design your environment in order for it to be obvious. A lot of us have already engineered our environment. You've probably heard that phrase before, an engineered classroom, an engineered environment. Maybe you've put the stop symbol by the classroom door so the students see that and know they have to stop before going. Maybe you've put a symbol by the light switches that say on or off. That's engineering your environment. It's making it obvious for your staff to want to model AAC all the time. And if I can make it obvious while I'm in there leading that lesson for 4 to 6 weeks, or while I'm in there for another month co-leading, then it's going to continue to be pretty obvious even when I'm not in there. And that's exactly what's happened. So in my classrooms, let me tell you about 2 things that I have used to design the environment to make modeling so obvious. It is time to model in your face. Okay, so the first one is, I told you guys that in a lot of my classrooms, I try to make a morning meeting or morning calendar time, just because it's when we get the most aided language stimulation, the most communication opportunities. So that's what I'm going to roll with right now. So morning meeting, we come into the classroom. We're usually coming from breakfast or whatever they've done first. We come into the classroom. I grab a timer, a digital timer. I beep, 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 set it to 5 minutes. It's loud. Get a loud timer. Beep, 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 beep. Okay, class. I set a timer for 5 minutes. When this timer goes off, we're going to come to the table for morning meeting. And so that made it obvious to the students. First of all, we were having morning meeting. Then I made sure that when they came to the table, the first thing they saw, if they didn't have them on them already, were their AAC devices. And while that 5-minute timer is going, I'm asking staff in the classroom, they're taking a break for 5 minutes. They don't need a ton of attention. I'm asking the staff, hey, can you grab those core boards? Hey, can you grab the devices that are on the charger? Hey, I'm making it so obvious that this is a big thing. We've set a timer, we've got 5, lay out all the AAC devices, the timer goes off. I stop the timer, I say, did you hear that? Our timer went off. That means it's time for morning meeting. Everybody sits down, and by the time we've done 4 weeks of me leading the lesson, everybody knows that you should be modeling during this time. And I'm going to tell you to be modeling if you're not modeling. So it's very obvious. They've associated that timer with a structured activity or lesson where modeling feels easy after a while because they're doing it day in and day out. I do not go in the classroom every day, but the teachers have been really good, even after just like 1 or 2 times of me showing that they're like, oh, this is like the easiest time of day for me to practice modeling. The paras are always on board. I have not had an issue with that. The second thing about that with the timer that works is after a while, they start associating, this is not research-based at all, this is definitely from my experience in the classroom, start associating a timer with a transition that leads into modeling and AAC implementation. I work in a high school where bells go off every 50 minutes. And so I feel like that bell acts as like a sort of timer throughout the day that they know there's a transition period where if you've been taking a rest or you haven't been modeling, it reminds you to transition into something where you are. And I have observed that in my classrooms. The second thing that makes the environment very obvious for my staff are the clicker counters. They come in really bright colors and we wear them on a lanyard. I mean, you can't miss yellow, pink, purple, and green hanging around somebody's neck. The other cool thing about clicker counters is that they click when you use them. And so you kind of build that association of clicking and modeling, and you're getting kind of that auditory feedback from that as well. And so those are the 2 big things in my classrooms that I feel like makes implementation and modeling obvious. That you're wearing your clicker counter, it's right there, it's a bright color, it makes a noise when you use it, and the timers. So make it obvious. And I'm sure we could brainstorm a ton of other ways to design our environment to make it obvious. And in the book, Design Your Environment is just one way to make something obvious. There are a ton more examples in there. All right, getting close to the end here. The second one is make it attractive. If you want to build a habit, you have to make it attractive. And one way in the book that he recommends doing this is to do something you really enjoy immediately before a difficult habit. So when I think about this for AAC, I'm thinking for morning meeting, the enjoyable thing that happened right in the morning was that we all ate breakfast. We're probably finishing up at least our first or second cup of coffee by this point. We've chit-chatted a little bit. To me and my staff, that's something we enjoy doing, is eating breakfast and drinking a cup of coffee before we have to start the day and start managing behaviors and providing aided language stimulation. So morning meeting, I feel like, has been a really good time to do that. After lunch, also everybody's nice and their tummies are happy. They're not distracted because they're hungry or anything like that. So making sure that it's something you truly enjoy right before you have to do what you don't really want to do, sometimes modeling. Maybe this paraprofessional needs a 3-minute break. Maybe she needs to step out into the hallway, go walk for 3 minutes and come back, and she just needed to get out of the classroom of screaming kids for 3 minutes. Make it attractive for them. When you show up, hey, you can go take a 3-minute break real quick and then come back and we're going to do our modeling. Whatever works for your people. This is just one example. The third one was to make it easy. The book talks about this law of least effort, which says that we as humans are always naturally going to gravitate toward the option that requires less work. So obviously the goal is for our staff to be modeling all day long, even when we're not there, have like rock star AAC implementation, but that's probably not going to happen at first. It will happen eventually with time. But if I walk into a training or I walk into coaching my staff and say, your goal is to model all day long, and if I show up and you're not modeling, you have failed. That's a lot of effort. Whereas if I say, I want you to model during morning meeting and during snack time, and that's it. Collect data during those two structured activities and see where we go. We're always going to gravitate toward the law of least effort. So make sure that when you're placing demands on your classroom staff or telling them when to model, you're not making it seem too hard. I know that we want them to model all day long. I promise you they will get there if they start small and work with just one or two structured times. When I think of when I read that book to start waking up early and working out, I had to think of what was the least amount of effort. Is it easier to wake up and do a 10-minute workout, or is it easier to wake up and do an hour workout? Is it easier to wake up and drive to the gym, or is it easier for me to wake up and just go into my living room or garage? We're always going to gravitate towards something that requires less effort. But I promise if you make it easy, it'll lead to this last one, which is that you need to make it satisfying. When we do something satisfying, it increases the odds that that behavior will be performed again. You can attribute this to food if you want. If you go to a restaurant and you have a drink or a meal that is so satisfying and so good, you're probably going to go back to that restaurant again. You might even order that same dish or that same drink. You're performing that habit again. So when it comes to AAC, there is nothing more satisfying than a student demonstrating intentional communication or spontaneous communication for the first time. The look on my classroom staff's faces when we're 4 to 6 weeks into this and all of a sudden they're making greetings with each other, they're asking each other questions or having spontaneous communication is so satisfying to see that. And so that's the big thing. The more that you model, the more progress our students are going to make, obviously, and the more satisfying it becomes for us. But lastly, before we end, we have about 4 minutes left, right on time. I was a little bit nervous about talking too long. Something else that's really satisfying for humans is to create a streak. So if you're a Fitbit user or Apple Watch user, Fitbit, you need to hit like your 10K steps a day, every day. Or for Apple users, I think you have like circles that you need to connect. And like, it's so satisfying to hit that 10K and to see your streak in the app, or it's so satisfying to finish that circle. And you're going to do it again because you did it once and it was really satisfying. And I'm going to keep doing that. And so if you think back to the clicker counters and how I said, I put something up on the wall and I use what they like to my advantage, coffee, wearing jeans, 10-minute extra long lunch break, giving them that visual of creating a streak for modeling daily is going to be so key for them. And also earning a reinforcement. Obviously, reinforcement is satisfying. If you hit a goal and I bring you a vanilla latte from Starbucks, you're going to be very satisfied. And you're going to want to earn another vanilla latte from Starbucks. So this is the last thing, is to make it satisfying. And to help you with that, I have a freebie for you. I know we're running out of time here, but I should have put it on the screen. I don't know that you'll be able to see it. It is a 30-day AAC challenge implementation tracker. It has 30 circles across it. What I do is I hang it up on the board in the classroom. They click on their clicker counters all day long. And at the end of the day, they fill in their number in the circle and they start creating this streak. We set a goal and we say, when we reach 1,000 words modeled, I'm going to draw somebody to win free coffee. So you're making it satisfying. You're making it very easy. You are engineering your environment for them to be able to see this also. So you can grab this freebie at emilydiazslp.com/tracker. And when you do that, you'll also be signed up to be on my email list and get updates and more freebies. The most important updates that are going to be coming across summer, now that I have a little bit of more time at home and I'm not having to do as much teletherapy, is really revamping the longer workshop that talks much more than just about staff buy-in, but more strategies, more implementation, more modules and training videos and things like that. So if you've already purchased that workshop and you did that with me before, you'll get all the updates for free. And for those of you who really enjoyed what I had to talk about today regarding AAC in the classroom, you will probably really love what I have to say about managing AAC in the classroom on a larger playing field. So make sure you sign up for that tracker. Make sure you get all my updates. And I hope that we can connect on some other platforms and just learn more about AAC together. I have 1 minute left. I don't know that that's enough time for questions, Sarah, but what do you think?
So you have lots of great feedback in the Slack channel. Thank you so much, Emily. This was really awesome. So there aren't a ton of specific questions, but I'm sure if you want to scroll back through and see what people were saying, people were asking for the books and the articles, so the references for that, and people were chiming in and giving links for that.
Awesome.
So yeah, I think you just make sure, it seems like everybody got the slides and all of that stuff. So
good. Yeah, I'll hang out in the Slack and answer some of those questions and make sure you guys have the names of the books, the links that you need for the articles and the tracker.
Okay, awesome. So thank you so much, Emily, and thank you everybody for watching along, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.